Alright, so we're at the point now where we're going to be wiring in all our electronics. As you can see, it looks like a mess, but we've got two sets of wires here. One's for our control unit for our EL2 gauges, and the other one is for our DECS tach. So we're going to go ahead and wire all these to where they need to go. We've got a ground, we've got a switchable ignition, we've got an illumination, and we have an RPM signal which we're going to extend to tap into the ECU. Find your points of where you want to tap into. We're using our stereo wires, so since we don't have a radio in here, we're just going to go ahead and take over some of these wires and tap directly in. So just go ahead and solder them or use the provided butt connectors that Apex will give you. We've gone ahead and shrink wrapped our wires, so we should be good to go now to connect our unit and see if everything powers on right. Okay, now we're ready to wire up our AVCR. We're also going to follow this up with our auto timer, but right now let's go over real quick what you're going to see when you open up your manual. First of all, don't forget to read all the warnings and cautions. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, you definitely want to get it installed by a professional installer, so on and so forth. But if you're going to choose to do it, well, first things first, you're going to go, and on the first few pages, you're going to see something like this. Now, all of this is what you're going to be referring to when you're looking both for your ECU and what wires are what. Over here shows what all the wires correspond to. So red wire is your ignition power, purple wire is your RPM signal or injector signal, green wire is your ground, black wire is your ground. Now these are tricky. Your green wire and your black wire are both your grounds. However, you want to make sure your green wire is closest to the ECU on that same ground line, and that your brown wire, your black wire, is actually an inch apart. So keep that in mind. That does make a difference. If you don't install that correctly, you will fall into some problems. Next, you have your gray wire and your white wire. Your gray wire is your throttle signal, and your white wire is your speed signal. You're going to find all these wires out of your ECU by corresponding the diagram, your diagram, to the ECU. And by diagram, the way you look that up is once you turn to the page that has your specific vehicle application. For my case, it's a Nissan Skyline R33 with the RB25 motor. So I go Skyline, R33, RB25, and then I find what year it was. Mine was the older one, so going off of this, we'll find out that I am a N4A. So when I turn to the next page, I've got a series of diagrams that looks like this. Turning to N4A, it's going to actually have all my pinouts as well as every single wire that I need to be looking for. So here's my injector, my throttle, my ignition power, my ground, my speed sensor, and my RPM. The first one we're going to do, since it's easy, is our ground. Our ground wire is going to be in the top right corner of our ECU if we're looking at it like so. Here I have an Apex Power FC for the RB25. The way that you're going to be looking at your diagram is as if you have the top up and you're looking right here. So my ground wire, according to this ECU, is going to be right up here, the furthest most top right pin. Now I'm going to look at my harness as a mirror image of this, and that's where my ground wire is going to be. So let's go to the ground wire and let's get that started. Okay, I found my ground wire. I'm going to go ahead and make one cut. Okay, now that I have one section cut out, next to strip off a piece, strip off a section on one end and strip off a section on the other. Alright, so now I have two bare ends. Now remember, our first one's the green one, which is closest to the harness, and our second one's the black one, which is going to be about an inch away from where we mount the green. So I'm going to go ahead and take my green wire and strip a section off of that. Now we're ready to solder. We're going to start with our green ground wire. I'm going to connect one end of the green with one end of our ECU ground, and then I'm going to connect these like this so they stay in a series. But before I do that, I'm going to take one of my pieces of my heat shrink. I'm going to slide it over one end like so. I'm going to put that out of the way, so after I connect these two and I solder it, I'll be able to heat shrink it so nice insulation and none of our wires are going to touch each other. Alright, now we're ready to solder. I'll go ahead and solder all three of our wires together like that. And next we're going to grab our heat gun. We're going to pull our heat shrink over our wire like so. And now we're insulated. Now we're going to do the same exact thing with our black wire, except we're going to make sure that we're about an inch away from this area. So we're probably going to cut up here. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and when we come back, you guys will see the finished product. Alright, we've completed installation of our AVCR wires to our ECU. Now, I'm going to go over the wires real quick. Our purple wire went straight to the RPM signal wire. The reason why we chose the RPM signal wire is so that we can control boost through gear, RPM, and speed. We could have chosen injector, but we didn't feel that we needed to monitor our injector duty cycle since we're running a Power FC with Commander. We could monitor our injector duty cycle actually through our Commander. So moving on, we've got our ground wire connected, and remember, you want to space the green wire from the black wire at least an inch. Next, our ignition wire, our speed signal, and our throttle signal. With all these wires connected, our AVCR is now complete and ready to be tuned. Next, we're going to move on to our auto timer.